who says you can't flood with an anamorphic lens? This is the Vazen 28 and 65mm review, and it is not a vlog review, so let's get into the real stuff.
I recently used these Vazen lenses to make a music video, and these things are kind of awesome. Let's get into it. I did reach out to Vazen to collaborate on this video potentially, but didn't have any luck. And when I found out that they shut their doors recently, that kind of explains that. So I really want to explore my experience with these lenses, why I loved working with them on this particular production, as well as the strange inconsistencies and problems they had that might have led to Vazen's downfall. Oh, and I actually talked about the music video I used these on already, so if you want to check out the music video, the previous video talking about shooting anamorphic on Micro Four Thirds, or the long form discussion with Caleb Hoover on anamorphic generally, definitely consider watching those after this video. They're down below. So the two lenses I used were the 28 and 65mm, skipped the 40mm, but more on that later. With the crop and stretch factors all considered, the lenses ended up having a horizontal field of view that looked about like a 31 and 72mm on full frame, while that vertical was closer to 56 and 130. But still, I thought they were a great set, just those two lenses. The build is equally good between the two, I would say, but as you might notice, one of these things is not like the other. The 28mm is really small compared to the 65mm, which is among the largest lenses I've ever used. And the 28 only has a T2.2 as opposed to the T2 of the 40 and 65. Of course, this small size is nice when you have two cameras, two rigs, one dedicated gimbal camera, like me, but in a proper set environment, you'd probably rather have everything lined up perfectly on your little cage and rails, so the small and inconsistent build is a bit of a gift and a curse. Although I thought the geared focus and aperture and everything worked perfectly fine and smoothly, just as good as you would expect from a lens like this. And while I didn't have time to test everything about the image quality, I didn't really notice any crazy focus breathing, distortion, or swimming, anything like that. It's all there compared to like a spherical lens, but I've seen a lot worse. I would say it's kind of in the middle ground when it comes to anamorphics. And of course, being manual cinema lenses, there's no electronic contacts, weather sealing, stabilization, or autofocus. Kind of par for the course. Wide open, these lenses are definitely dreamy and on the softer side. I think if you want a little bit more punch or accuracy, T2.8 would be a good balance. T4 would be really sharp, I think, and it actually was on a few shots that I did. I actually had to go back and blur those shots a little bit in the music video because they were like distractingly sharp. So you might want to stick to a consistent aperture, not only just for light, but also for the look. Although the 28mm kind of seemed to be sharper overall, I do wonder if it was just hard to tell what was in focus, to be honest, because, you know, with some lenses, it's not quite sure what the ghosting and the aberrations, because some shots on the 65 do seem a little soft, others do seem really sharp at the same settings, so maybe it was just my copy, maybe it was certain focal distances. I'd be curious what you guys think if you used them before. There are also some optical issues like chromatic aberration, ghosting, all the usual stuff, but if you've used some cheaper anamorphic lenses or adapters, it's actually pretty good compared to them, but not nearly as clinical as other lenses out there. Nothing offensively bad anyway. The close focus here isn't great. The 28mm, I don't know if you could even call this a close-up on smaller objects, although people, it's obviously fine. And then jumping into the 65, again, still pretty far away. And image quality holds up okay, doesn't seem too much worse, maybe a little bit of extra fall off in the edges. And if you start using diopters, it gets a little messy quick, especially if you use really cheap ones like me. This first shot's the 28 with like a +4, I think, and the next two are the 65 with like a +10, and even at f11, f16, it's pretty rough image quality wise, but it's still a vibe, and a bunch of those shots still made it into the music video, and they look great. What are you gonna do? So, anyways, what am I talking about? Okay, so let's go into flare. It's pretty great here, actually. I do tend to like it, even though some people talked about the inconsistencies on the 28, which does have a mix of blue and orange and neutral with some rainbow glares towards the edges. Changes a little bit of character, closed down. Overall, I loved how the 28 flares looked. I think maybe even more than the 65. Not too sci-fi, but definitely anamorphic, which is exactly what I personally want. The 65 doesn't have much of these orange artifacts, but the blue and rainbow glares, especially when towards the edge of the frame, I gotta say, I don't really have any problems with what's going on here. I think it looks great. And of course, it cleans up a little bit and changes when stopped down, but I think they just look really good, pretty much. I mean, from a stylistic point of view, and practically, these flares really worked in our favor, and especially the VFX shots of fire, that real flickering flare really tied things together in a way I just loved and really sold those effects. The bokeh here gets really high remarks again from me. The blur and separation and focus transition looks just really great overall to me, and the vintage characteristics really come out in this element of the lens, especially wide open. The 28 does have fairly sharp bokeh, edgy kind of bokeh for sure. Sometimes taking the shape of like weird lines or curves or diamonds when things are only somewhat out of focus, but again, this inconsistency is kind of part of the charm for me. The 65 can have a bit of the same edge, but there's a 3D quality to these lenses for me, even on these smaller Micro Four Thirds sensors. That's why I like anamorphic on this format so much, is because it can really emphasize the depth of field more than you would expect on your average T2 lens. You can see here the background isn't that far away, has a little bit of a quirky edge, but when the background is further or the shot is like closer focused, the background really does just have the ability to melt away on the 65 in a really nice way. At the end of the day, I really enjoyed these lenses for this music video production with 2 cameras, sticks, gimbal, separate. But I can see why people on pro sets really didn't always love these, whether it was used for Micro Four Thirds or Canon RF or something like that. Obviously, the first thing here would be the 28mm being really an odd one out, making it difficult to use. I know there was an issue with inconsistent stuff where the feet markers on the lenses were originally in tenths of feet. It looks like some newer copies fixed that. The 40mm doesn't have a thread. The 28mm has been reported to have different characteristics, but I don't know, it matched well enough for my shoot. And yeah, the different sizes and filters and everything makes matte box, follow focus, all that stuff really difficult to use on like a more high-end set. So just kind of weird. I also feel like by trying to make these lenses as versatile as possible, they kind of ended up doing the opposite. I mean, they cover a Super 35. Their use was limited to some red and I think Micro Four Thirds cameras, but they either seemed a little too budget for shooting with a red or maybe a little too expensive for shooting on Micro Four Thirds, but maybe that's just me. I do wonder how things would look if they made an entire set that was like in the style of the T2.2. Maybe they were all close to the size of that 28mm, maybe a little bit bigger, but still pretty compact, relatively affordable, covered Super 35. I don't know if this would have helped, but I don't know. Although with how few cameras really support open gate recording, maybe the stretch factor of 1.8 times was a little too niche to begin with. I think by the time they really started making a name for themselves in 2019 and 2020, full frame filmmaking really started taking off with more and more anamorphic options, which, I mean, they did start releasing in 2022 and 23, I think, but they ended up, unfortunately, like I said, closing their doors in March of 2024. You might have seen their statement. I'll read it now. As we turn the page to the final chapter of Vazen's story, we want to take a moment to express our deepest gratitude with you, our customers and partners. Your unwavering support has been the cornerstone of our journey, fueling our passion for creating lenses that bring visions to life. Though we have come to the difficult decision to conclude our operations, the memories and images captured through our lenses will continue to inspire us. It has been an extraordinary privilege to be a part of your creative process and to witness the world through your unique perspectives. From the bottom of our hearts, thank you for allowing us to be part of your creative journey. We bid you farewell, and with the hope that your stories will continue to be told through the beauty of your captures in all the days to come, the Vazen team. Starting this niche in general to bring more extreme anamorphics at a lower price really was admirable and ambitious, and even though they were only able to create 2 sets of 3 lenses each, these lenses aren't going anywhere. I mean, not, you know, I mean, they're going somewhere, but I mean, they'll be owned privately up on ShareGrid to rent or in dedicated rental houses, and they and the work that filmmakers have and will continue to create on them will go on for some time now, and the industry of affordable anamorphic lenses as a whole will also continue. Someday I'd love to try the full frame set for sure, but I really did enjoy my time with the original set, and I hope I get to use them sometime again soon. Maybe even own them someday. That would be great. Anyway, guys, thanks for stopping by. If you liked what you saw, if you like this sort of dedication to Vazen and my limited work with them, I think it would be great if you could share some links or ways to find your work if you've used these Vazens on your own projects, and tell me about your experience with them, because they really were great lenses despite some of their flaws for me, and that small big lens perspective and like style actually was really helpful on this set. So I felt like I got what they were going for, even if in other productions and other YouTubers have talked about how that was not necessarily as helpful for them and in fact held them back in some ways. So anyway, yeah, comment, like, subscribe, and if you did subscribe, I'll see you when I see you.